So why and how was the learning teaching dimension created? We're going to start about how it was created because no one talks about this. So I'd like to introduce that first, and then I'm going to talk about why. I might also talk about it while I'm talking, so we'll see how it goes because I'm going to fully channel it because I'm ready now. Before I had it all written down in many different fragments because the information was so intense, and I had to decipher what's the best way to say it. We are getting, like I said in the last episode, we are getting closer and closer to the things that are a bit conspiracy vibes, and so I'm being extra careful that this doesn't add to that. Instead, it empowers people, because conspiracies show that there's something that people can feel and take the temperature of, but making it a conspiracy or calling it a conspiracy or blaming anything is where people unempower themselves, because what we should be doing is learning and teaching, right? that's the even if you don't fully embody your soul, as we talked about in the last episodes, that is something that is truly admired and one of the most amazing things you can do. So there's nothing wrong with conspiracies, but what actually is the thing that is harmful, and again, what other people who don't like conspiracies, or people who say they're logical, are upset about, they are onto something as well, and that is this. It's that if you did get some information, you need to digest it, and you're like, people need to know the truth. They don't need to know the truth. They need to know about, the teaching of it. So just blurting out what you receive is a very strong candidate for your just right away and being scared and saying that bad things are happening. That is a very strong sign that you have an underdeveloped ego. That is, you haven't befriended your ego. You haven't worked on your ego. You haven't worked on your filters. And so the way that you view life is not only very human based, and when I say human, it means one POV. So let's say it's just a religion, that's one POV. So you're believing things based on one POV, just one topic. So anyway, so that is something to keep in mind. Again, even if I am a human as well, I try my best. Like I said, I sat on this information for quite a while. Please, please, please look into yourself when you listen to this. This is why a lot of the content I'm putting out there now on Patreon and also this podcast is voice notes, because these are not topics that people even know about. So I found that hearing a voice is a lot it's a lot better because it helps you connect to your energy. So anyway, so that's what I've found. Doesn't mean videos are going away. I'm still doing the practicing with energies in the first tier of Patreon. And that'll involve, I still have a long list, but later I'll be asking people for suggestions. But for now, there's quite a few on the list. And that's going to have lots of visuals because that helps people with that stage of connecting. But if you're listening to this right now, it means you've gotten to a stage where you can look within and you're able to do that. And who knows, you never know, maybe you just found this and you're about to do that. So I thought I'd start with that before I begin. And here we go. Let's start. So I'm going to start with the fact that I'm sure if you are listening to this, you've heard many different spiritual teachers and writings saying that this is a learning place. And they say Earth is learning. It is a school. And people say even in lots of religions, they say, learn your lessons. God is testing me. Testing is teaching. It's like the words of education, right? There's hierarchies in our systems, and we're constantly, we basically, as a kid, we have a family that has a hierarchy, and then you go to school and there's a hierarchy where there's a teacher that knows more than you, and then you learn from them, and it's throughout your life. So even if what I'm talking about is really wild and out there for you, we can all agree that it's very clear in our life that these systems are very much a learning teaching situation. And I know that sometimes when I say this, because I've done a lot of content brushing up on this, but I haven't done the official thing, because every time I did, that part of the video would get deleted. So I stopped doing it. I would just mention it. I'd say it on the lives a bit. So there's a lot of people who were on my lives that heard what was going on. And in the second part of this, the next episode, I'm going to talk about that in more detail. But this one's focusing on this. So how it works and why and stuff like that. So when you think of learning and teaching, you think of just, like I said, the hierarchies, education system, family scenarios, elders and youngsters, people who are, a little bit full of themselves and they think they know everything. There's people who are gurus. There's just, you name it. So that's what our first thought is when it comes to mind. But when you start to go deeper, this nickname can be quite deep, because let's zoom out. Let's say you are an alien on another planet and you completely demolished the whole planet. I'm not going to say it just in case for people's ears, and, never know. They demolished the whole planet just in one fell swoop with what they're working on. And they do it consciously. They're not doing it unconsciously. Now, from our perspective in the learning teaching dimension, we're going to, and also if you haven't transcended duality, so that's like a filter within a dimension. Your POV is going to be like, that is a negative alien. That is an evil alien. But from the perspective of bigger energies, when I say old or bigger, it means that they are made up of many, many different beings. And those beings are not only living, doing their own thing, but they're also a part of this being. So this being can choose to be those beings anytime they want. They can send things. They're gigantic, right? They're close to source size. The alien that we're talking about that belongs with this being doesn't see it that way. And that being, when they decide to, there's many different things, we don't know how they are, but let's say they're like a human. Let's say they pass away. So let's say they pass away and they get directed. Excuse me. From both of their perspectives, the bigger perspective and the smaller perspective, when it's getting distributed, they're going to be curious, because you become, at one point when you do pass away, that bigger POV and the small one at the same time. So you're like focusing on the two and other things going on, because everything's happening at once. It's very hard to explain this. I usually do linear, but in this case, I can't do linear because it's going to do the listener a disservice. So when this happens, they will see this. They're going to see this POV as, why did that energy do this? What was the reason? And so there's no place for, this is all, by the way, Earth is not the only place that has a learning teaching dimension, but it was the first. And from our perspective, and I'm going back to linear. From our perspective, it was the first. From other energies' perspective, doesn't mean first, but it kind of is. It's hard to explain. So, meaning I think actually, if we see it from their perspective, it means that there's more going on there, and the other ones haven't developed as much. So that's why it's very popular. Like, there's Dolores Cannon. Don't say her name too much. She, for example, would talk about this, how, Earth is a place, is a school. That's what she was saying. And not only did she say it was a school, but also there's a place, I mean, not, it's a place for learning, right? And she's like, that's, you know, that's how it is. And remember how, like I said, I'm not a fan because I know that she was doing things from a very hurt place and never worked on herself and used other people's experiences to do this. And that set the pathway for other people to copy that. And that's unfortunate that they're going to do that as well. But anyway, it's okay. I have to let it go. But it's a good example of why people go, okay, well, why does she say this? This is why. It has the most possibilities. There's the most choices. We'll get to this in the... It will be the next episode when we talk about choosing. You know, when people talk about contracts and choosing, this is actually what is going on. It's about ancestors and all kinds of stuff. So when she was saying this and she was saying, okay, well, these, you know, these people are coming, you know, these energies are coming and you reincarnate and stuff like that. She's thinking from a human mindset. Anyway, so the reason why I'm giving this example of this alien we were talking about that demolishes the whole planet, there's something that they need to do. So clearly there is an expansion there. So they see it as an extension or an expansion that needs to be fulfilled. And there's other beings that handle the pain and the suffering and things like that, but we're not going into that. Pain and suffering that the beings going through because of what they did, and the other beings that got affected on that planet and the planet itself. So those things will be taken care of, but that is not what we're talking about. That's why I'm trying to just make a really tiny example, because the more complicated the example, the more it's going to be difficult to understand, because it's already weird, right? So when we're going to go back to linear again, when this happened, and since if you've listened, hopefully you've listened to the soul, how, the soul episodes, where basically the aliens or avatars or whatever POV you're looking at them, they come to the planet and they need a place to, file into, like I was saying, filing into Earth. And even those big energies that want to come as is and see what happens when they arrive, they file into Earth, right? And so Gaia organizes that so that they can file in the right places. And their overall in Earth, it was minimized. So because all time is now and it isn't linear, those beings can keep coming. And so, when we talk about New Earth, we're going to reintroduce New Earth in a second. We talk about New Earth all the time. New Earth is basically Gaia turning up the dial and giving more space to every single dimension, all of Earth, so that more of those beings can come filing in again, if that makes sense. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's not as related as to the other topics that we're going to talk about in the episodes that are coming in. But it's important to know about the humans. So because you learned about how our humans hold souls in the most easy way, and how those beings were transferred from one dimension to another, this was a good opportunity because now there was humans that could express themselves, and they switched them, right? But they needed to have a matrix or a dimension, it's like a simulation or video game kind of vibe thing. They needed to have a place to file in beings like that alien we talked about that did something. This is just one example out of billions. Like, there's so many examples of what a small energy that is not gigantic, like an avatar or the avatar program that we will talk about in the future. None of those things are perfect for something like this alien that had an issue, right? So they needed a place that matches what their needs are. They still get to go to Earth, but they also, we'll talk about what else happens. So this is going to sound a bit funny and, like a myth, or not myth, but, those movies that you watch and you see these like gods at the table. It's that kind of vibe, but it's many different energies. It's not the cliche things that we think of. They don't even look like, they don't have bodies. It's just all of these energies got together, and it's kind of a discussion, but it's not, it's hard to explain. It's like, think of a person standing. This is how it is for me when I go into meditation, when I go to a meeting, and you're someone standing, and if you've seen futuristic movies, and all these like data is coming in from all directions, from top, bottom, sides, everywhere, and is coming into you, right? You can think of this, but all the energies are that being, so it's just like in the center. And so all of the different things are coming at once, and they're also in the side. So it's like, this is what infinity looks like, because these are not beings that are for humans. They are, you can think of like programmers, they're matrix creators, they're organizers, they're very Gaia energy of the, organizing. Nature's involved. So I call them architects. So there's architects, there's the archons, there is the nature, there are the gods. The gods will come, but they are a collaboration between the human's personal, and they don't get created until the learning teaching dimension. So we'll wait for that. So when something, like I said in the last episode, when something happens like the Anunnaki switch over, when people think of the your DNA changing and things like that, this is a new possibility for things that couldn't happen before on Earth. So they're like, okay, so what should we do? And so that's why they got together in this way, where they're all coming together and sharing data. How should we do this? So everyone agrees that the matrix in question that they're creating together, most of them are actually of Earth, so they're going to be nature and things like that, but some of them are the creators of Earth, and they've already moved on. So there's so much going on, and there's so many different possibilities and stuff like that. But they can only create, so even though they have that infinity and that these ideas and these unique ways, like, how I say gods are the translators of these abstract, things. These are the abstract things. But these abstract things are going to have to figure out what they're going to do with what's already on Earth physically, all the possibilities that have been created. So with this new type of human, how are they going to utilize this possibility, for other beings that want to come and things like that? Because they can't choose ahead of time, really, like, an avatar where they can create their body, but they can kind of do it while, like, they're like, okay, how can they do it? Like, how is this going to work, right? So what they did is they decided, everyone agreed. Some of them didn't secretly like it because, like I said, these are abstract energies. Some of them are so big, and there's some that are connected to my energy that were not happy about this. They knew that it was the best for the situation and to get started, but they were not happy about it. So they were kind of begrudgingly like, okay, yeah. And we'll talk more about that in the future. It has to do with the Sacred Heart / Christianity stuff. And I know a lot of people that are wondering about Christianity are going to be very interested in it because it meant a lot to me. It's very, it's heartbreaking, it's beautiful, but it's also cool, and it makes a lot of sense. So I will do it, but definitely not yet because it's its own topic. And I need to bring all those energies in. And at the moment, I'm only around, the energies that specifically related to this topic. So back to this. So just keep that in mind. Know that is something I will bring up later. So they still say yes. And so they all decide that they will create a matrix that is based on limiting humans based on humans' creations. So whatever they come up with, whatever they bring in from their energy they stream and stuff like that, because they can stream it, and they can't receive any help unless they need those things, want those things. And so when they do certain rituals and certain specific things, they can get help. But then they're like, okay, so how is that going to work? Because if that works, then some of these humans that are connected to the right energies, that know about Earth, or they know about this, they're going to take advantage of others, and it's going to become so difficult. And this ends up happening anyway. But they're like, how can we make sure that that doesn't happen? So some of the energies, a lot of the gods and goddesses, and the architects that already do architect kind of things and deal with the, they kind of like hold on to the groups and things like that. They file themselves into new groups, and the fall happens. And so this is what people think of as the fall, as in like Christianity, which makes sense. And I'm going to tiny bit touch on it, because not fully, but remember when I mentioned the Sacred Heart, Christian thing, I'll talk about them in detail. They were not happy with it. And some of the family members were tempted and kind of thought they would just do it, because if they did this, they would be, it would be like helpful. One of them is the story of how they have God being mad at Lucifer, or what, there's so many different names or whatever. They get angry at Lucifer because Lucifer is like, should we do this? And no, not Lucifer, sorry. God is like, Lucifer, should we, I'm going to do this. And he wanted to do it, but then I think it was either Lucifer or a few other ones, they went into the system and they pulled a piece of themselves and put it into the fell into the system, gave their life to the system. And yeah, that right now they don't want me to say who it is. I don't know why they're doing that. I think it's because I have to get it right, the story right. But anyway, just one of them is upset. And so we have that storyline. Obviously, all those storylines mean many different things, not just that. But that's one of the what do you call it, storylines. Now, the other thing that makes funny, it also is funny, is in that storyline, people also have added, they've added the Lucifer, they've added different names. They've also added, what do you call it? They've added the, sorry, they're telling me other things as I'm talking. They added the Satan thing as well. And Satan basically is, if you've listened to the first podcast, is the system that limits the gods from getting out of hand, which means the original energies hopping a ride in the gods to, take advantage and do all these things. So each of those gods that give their life to being in there, they also bring that Satan in as well. So that the Satan system. So when people, that you can see again, that storyline, why people are getting pieces of it, and they're onto something, but it's from this. So basically all of those beings, they have their own little Satan that tells them, keeps them from not doing things and questions them, and it won't allow them to just become water all of a sudden and ruin a whole village because their child is being a human right now and they don't like what they're doing, that kind of stuff. They prevented this. So when that disagreement happened between those, there's other ones too, it's not just them, that's just a tiny story. They felt offended because they're like, hey, we're not supposed to really participate in this and put all of our energy into this, because we need to think of a backup plan and all these other things, for example, Yeshua and Mary Magdalene and that kind of stuff. We need to think of backup plans and things to do that can encourage humans to not stay only by themselves, because we meaning the energy part of, they're called the bridge, they call them the bridge energy family. And so basically what happens is they want people to have the options. They're obsessed with people having the options, and they don't like them being limited at all. They understand that, we already talked about that. But anyway, so they were telling me the other stuff, and this other energy just said not to say those other things. So we will talk about that later in the when we start talking about the Sacred Heart and all that stuff, and Yeshua and things like that. But anyway, so if you can imagine this, all these energies did this, and then they have to be held by like a bank. And this is when the archons come in. So the archons are sometimes they are the actual God decided to become an archon and hold all those energies. So like, for example, let's say, and remember, this is another thing to keep in mind. Those gods, remember, gods are a job role. So if it's a job role, there's an energy that's in that job role, and they have to, they are going into that system too, not just the job role. So it's the job role and that system. So even if that energy that created that God job role didn't want to be a part of this, they were. So there's a lot of things I've also learned, like I think a couple weeks ago, about some energies that didn't want to go in, and it created a lot of chaos for a lot of different reasons. I will be possibly sharing that on Patreon in the 3rd tier, but I'm not sure. So when that happened, it's carrying all that stuff in, and there's a lot of baggage, and there's that family that's not happy about it and things like that. So now there's a learning teaching dimension, and it's been created. This is when things get a little bit wild. Even I'm like, what is going on? So another thing to keep in mind is I usually talk about this in my British Museum tours about history. I probably should do a history as well. I didn't think of doing that first, but I'm going to touch on it a bit. So unfortunately, no one really understands history in the learning teaching dimension, and rightly so, because it's going to have time and things like that, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But history in the learning teaching dimension is not only a bunch of modeled off of a bunch of different places, but it's also places meaning other dimensions of things that we would talk about with like Egypt and things like that. There is some interesting things going on with history. So when we're thinking of history, sometimes we're thinking of history that has been told to us or that we have records of, which is, the actual items. And sometimes we are kind of connecting with the original place. I'm going to also touch on this. I just realized I have something ready to go for about different countries, continents, and things like that. All of those I explain along with the actual nature of the place, like the physical nature of the place. The land that you can touch and that kind of stuff. And it gets very complicated. So that we'll touch on later, and it's not necessarily needed for this, but just keep that in mind that there is a lot of organization going on, not just in the learning teaching dimension, but also outside. So those structures, mainly nature and some human things, get changed according to, in the learning teaching dimension, they get changed depending on the other dimensions and the current one. So this is where it gets complicated. Like I said, I keep saying that, but it gets very complicated with history, because you have, when people go, no, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's both, no, it's all of it, right? So when someone says this thing happened in history and they faked it or whatever, yes, the intention behind it, the person who's faking it on purpose and they don't even know, those people, that is the part that we need to hold people accountable for or not be happy about, because they're basically, I talked about this in another voice note that I'm going to post about why we feel weird about people lying. I will post it. And what that means and the deepness of it. So that is the stuff that we need to explore, but they are actually telling the truth, and they don't even know they're telling the truth, because it could be from not the learning teaching dimension. So when someone says that is false, did not happen. This is not in the facts. This is not in the books. This is not in archaeology. It can't be proven. It means it didn't happen in the learning teaching dimension. And it means that it's not needed in the learning teaching dimension. So all the things that we find in archaeology are on an as needed basis. And they stay on an as needed basis. So that's just a tiny quick thing about history. So history is not linear, as everyone should know if they don't already. But for us to function in the learning teaching dimension, talk to other people in the learning teaching dimension, and to grow, you must observe time. So now we're going to get to time. So they've created this place. They've created this place by giving their whole energy to it. When you give your whole energy to it, you create a database. So we have, obviously it is still Earth, so you have the options of Earth, but they're going to be filtered through these archons and gods and holders of the matrix, right? So they're all holding this. So yes, you will, the things that they do pull through, they might pull some things. And when I say pull, I'm making it human, so it makes more sense. So these architects, so the archons hold everything, and the architects are the ones that move things around and things like that. And then the gods will follow through or communicate in between things. They still do that, even though originally they represent an original energy. So they kind of serve as that, as the the knowledge of Earth, kind of, with their own knowledge. So it's a mix. So they're doing the same job role as being a communicator. So it's still like the same case, but it is a more compact, matrixy vibe. So this is another reason why when I teach about getting a hold of different energies within you, and a lot of people get scared of gods, and they see, because people are not stupid, they can see a lot of stuff. So when they start to look into things, they're like, okay, gods and demons and angels are evil, and all these beings are evil because they're taking energy, and they don't understand that distribution of the energy, like that we need to be able to have the experiences that we do, because they're the ones that are going to express it. The architects are going to be the ones that move it around and pull it and bring it in and things like that. They pull through dimensions, all that stuff. So it's a thing. Like, it's, they're different than when you connect to the gods through yourself and the energies through yourself. So that's why people say go within. People meaning me. All the time, go within. Don't seek outside. If you do seek outside, make sure it is to nourish within. So you're like when we eat food, we're eating food and putting it inside us to nourish ourselves. We should not be doing things because we think we're lacking it. So we're nourishing what's already there. Even people would eat because they think that they're hungry or whatever. You're actually nourishing and keeping yourself grounded on Earth and staying on Earth, basically. That's the main reason why you eat. The hunger and, that kind of stuff, that is, the mechanism to remind us to eat and to do these things and all that stuff. But the true thing is the nourishment. And nourishment doesn't mean you're missing anything. How people say you're missing these vitamins. No, you are nourishing with those vitamins. So you're enhancing, you are keeping yourself on Earth. So in this case, instead of enhancing you, it's keeping you as an earthling. It's keeping your body from, keeping your body happy. So it's the same thing goes for what you look outside. You don't do it to complete. You don't look for things to complete your process. You do it to nourish your process. And that process needs to be fully backed by your inner world. So that was a tangent because we're getting to the parts that get a bit scary as well. So, so when this starts to happen, there are other dimensions. So this is why people see things like, different aliens, like, the popular weird ones with reptilians, and that's why it got into a creepy place of the people who decided to talk about it, and they got racist and things like that about what it is. It's because they don't understand that we're in a different dimension than they are, and they're taking advantage of the limitations of the learning teaching dimension. And the way that they're doing this is not what you'd think. They're not taking advantage of us and hurting us and being creepy. I mean, it is creepy from that perspective. But when you actually know what's going on, I'm going to do a quick side note about this. It's going to change your mind. So this needs to be brought up now, even though I'm going to go into more detail later about these processes and stuff. I'm going to say this now because this is what starts to happen. There are other beings in different dimensions that are fully there. They're probably, I'd say, they're not like avatars, because avatars are a type of what people would think an alien is, that is so big it needs to make a specific suit, or I talked about it in the last ones, or an outfit, like a being, and is limited to the space of where they are and the limit of time of where they are before they, go back. So they're not here forever. These energies are, and there's many reasons why, and it's a whole different story, and I'm not going there yet, but they're there. And when you're here and you don't have the right elements, like you're here and it's not working, or there's something that you're lacking. In this case, it's not about nourishment, it's about lacking. You need help from the other versions of you. So humans also have issues with knowing this, because they think of past lives. And this is why every time I know people want to talk to others and they're just finally realizing about these things, and so it's their introduction, but it's damaging, because if you think everything's in the past and it's done and people become ghosts and beings become ghosts, which is not the case, then you think that everything's done, and when something you learned happened, it's done. It's not done. There is another version. We can still connect with them. It doesn't mean you're connecting with them there. You are connecting to a piece of them that is coherent and can talk. And I'm not going to go through that. I talk about those things in sessions. So if you're interested, we can talk about that. So you can do that. And if a dimension that you're connecting with is fully not aware of these things, and that other energy connects with it, and they know how things work, it doesn't mean they're big or better or anything. They're just in a different dimension that allows this process. They're going to connect with you and take advantage of that system. And they're not only going to take advantage of it from you, they're going to take advantage of it from the beings that are actually supposed to distribute the energy around. So like when you do a ritual, which we all do every second, even if we don't know, there's conscious ones and unconscious ones. But if you do a ritual and that energy gets pulled and distributed to you, because it's this earth energy, it's not, and the learning teaching dimension energy, not the energy of your own energy, like, your soul and stuff, not that's different. But you have a combination of all this stuff. So that's why sometimes people, will do really well, like even if they get in a horrible car accident or something like that, there's instances where someone just comes back to life and like their body gets healed or weird things like that. It's because it's not just your soul at play that is going on. It also has to do with all these beings that are distributing energy. So if they decide that this is like this, and you decide, and all these energies decide together, it could happen. Like someone could come back from the dead. Like, it would be against the rules if it was really far in advance and nature was already claiming you back and things like that. That would be a bit uncomfortable and there would be some issues. But if it's just happened, there's a lot of times where that can just get redone. But we're not going there. That is a whole different topic again. But just to let you know, there's a lot at play. And so when we only think it's us and we near-death experience and things like that, we need to know that it's not like that. There's so much going on, and there's so many parts of you, like not just like, how people are like multidimensional. There's so many parts of you that are doing things that are not just your life that you're living right now. And it's like, it is happening right now, but it's not what you can see right now. So you should, in like when they, so we're going back to when they created this is supposed to be protected, but these energies also had a problem, and they found a loophole. They saw that they found out that they had a version of them. This is how it started, and they did that. So there's other energies that do this too, but this is an example of why the energies decided that this is not a good idea, which I will talk about later. But they all were like, actually, we need to like try and get Gaia to give more energy to Earth again. And Gaia, at first, this was the newer stuff that people were they still think it's happening, because no one realizes no one realizes that they have all the energy now. But about 2 or 3 years ago, they'd be going in meetings with the meeting thing I talked about with Gaia, and saying, please, like, we need to like have more energy. She's like, no, because then these energies can come and do these. And but if they don't know, if all these humans don't know these things, and they keep thinking these little small things that don't help them, at one point they're all going to be just doing not living the lives that they actually needed to do when they came, like when they're supposed to do this. After negotiations, they realized that, okay, this is probably the best way forward. And this is also what spiritual people about 3 years ago were like, we won the war, and things like that. Every time they say there's a war, it means there was a discussion. Like every single time, unless they're actually seeing like a different planet or something like that. But if it has to do with Earth, it was a discussion about, because we're all in the learning teaching dimension, so it was a discussion about the learning teaching. So anyway, we're going to go back, but that is that was again another important side note to keep in mind. So when they created this, those beings were doing this, and the reason why this happened, those connections that they made, was not just all randomly, they're just like connected with a version of themselves. These parts were placed on Earth. So it's a bit weird, but you can think of it like when you turn on a video game, and like, let's say you're playing Sims, I don't know, any of those video games, and all the people are there already. They already have been living life and stuff. So you can think of it like a copy overlay. And when I say a copy overlay, it is basically, I don't know if anybody have seen it. I mean, if you've looked at history, you would see. There's a point where they don't see humans. Like, it's just like a weird cutoff. And yeah, obviously people are not sure, and they've looked at the actual Earth and fossils and things like that, and then what they have found, that that point has changed throughout our recorded history, right? And when that happens, as needed, like as we need things, if people are like wanting to know more about things, the more you get, right? So that's why we keep finding new things, and it keeps getting older, like the civilizations keep getting older. It's because those are being introduced. But when this first started, first as in for our sake linear, when they make the learning teaching dimension, they did an overlay. And that overlay is basically a copy of all the dimensions on Earth. So it's a copy of other beings doing things, humans that are kind of similar doing things, and it's an overlay. So like I said, it's not it's not everything, and it's very complicated, and they won't let me go into detail, but the best I can do as an example is as if all of the things are there, but they're not really there. They're to get started for the game, if that makes sense. So, and it's because it's not linear, that's why it's hard to say. But just think of all these, like a copy paste overlay, and it's like when a plane is this is how wild it is. It's like a plane landing, and when it lands, it goes boop, 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 like that, and it starts, instead of flying, it goes from flying to walking. So there's this overlay that happened. There was an overlay period, and that overlay period was a bit complicated because it's not humans, It's other beings and what they went through. So some of the stories we have are very confusing, because they were put in here for that reason. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to go into too much detail because the history, like I said, is its own thing. So now there's options. I'm going to make it so that they're like, it's kind of obvious or whatever, like it's as linear and obvious as it can get. Now they have options of some of the stuff that's on Earth. So the humans can sometimes, when they want to, like the beings that want to be a human and come in the learning teaching dimension, sometimes they want to do both. They want to go somewhere else, like, because remember, the energy is it's not always the same. It's not like you just go one going in, right? A lot of the time it's never one actually, but just for our brain's sake, just think of yourself splitting up, and there's like, Egypt, all these different places. So you split your energy all over the place, right? This is not most of the people on Earth. It's not the learning teaching dimension. So this is why when someone has a past life thing and they think that it's past life, and they really do because of the death thing, so they see their death and things like that, it means that they have more people, everything that they see in a death. It could be a filter, but it's very rare. It means that their energy is very closely connected to, or they're connecting to the learning teaching dimension versions of them. Because the time thing that started, right? The time and the timelines and the things are already started and they're already existing, and you're literally just taking off where you left off. Now, this is the part that gets complicated, is, I keep saying that, but each place that has been copied also has a specific energy thing. And I'm going to again talk more detail about this too. So each of those places have that. But you can only go into your energy places or create and bring new ones. So for us, it would look like that happening over and over again. These people, these energies that want to be humans, have other versions of them that are not in the learning teaching dimension. They want to bring that there. They're like, oh, I'm on Earth, but I don't have a learning teaching, so I'm going to bring this. So we're going to see it as a linear thing of them doing this one at a time, but it happens all at once. So that's why it looks like everything's all set up like a sim game, because all of the energies did this. And so because all time is now, and it's very hard, like I said, I'm struggling with this because I'm trying to make sure it's not as complicated, but I think you get it. If you don't, we can go through this in more detail. So there has to be a time thing, right? So it's funny because it is a co-creation. So yes, they were aware that there needs to be measurements and things like that, but it's not as obvious as we think. There are energies that, because, we just think of, oh, there's the god of rulers or there's the god of math. It's not like that. It's where does that energy of measurement and organization come from, right? That's what it comes from. So there's a lot of collabs with that, and they're there and ready to move that energy around. So the thing that happens is the human that's there, they might have energy that's connected to this, or they might just feel the vibe in the learning teaching dimension. This is another thing. This is why I'm using this as an example, because time is important to talk about, but it's also this. It's very important to realize that the vibe of knowing certain things is why people get really frustrated and think people are stealing ideas and stuff like that. It is so transparent and potent in this dimension when there are the energies that are holding it are here. So this is another reason why, yes, obviously the things, I'm going to talk about this in a second. Yes, the things that we do are favored based on what we've limited ourselves with, like a hierarchy, for example. But we also got inspired in the air and how it feels, basically, from those energies that make up this matrix. So if there are lots of gods of measurement and things like that, because they wanted to make it physical and slow down the vibration, as in like, not vibration, but you know what I mean, like they slow down to make physical matter. What is that slowness? What energy needs to be here to do that, to keep that together? And also for these the limitation of the humans, because if they're not if they are able to be infinite and know all the things about themselves, that's not limited to who they are. They won't be able to pull things as they come up and remember and feel things. But what happened is, you do feel those pressures. So not all. Like, for example, if people feel like being logical is more of a special, thing, rather than someone who is, I don't know, a bit wild and quirky and creative or whatever. Not because both are creative. I don't like when people say creative versus no creative. We're all creative. But someone who's very logical and, stands by that and kind of gets mad at people. And then the other one's the opposite and is more free and like open, and a bit too open in their case. So then, see, I'm even saying too. It is in the human stuff, but there is this something in the air. It's something that feels, because this is something that happens in sessions as well. I'll ask people, I'm like, what is your ideal? And we'll go through their whole childhood. We'll go through all these different things, and they still can't find what their ideal is. And then we go through society, and they still are like, no, I actually don't care about that. And it comes from that. And then I usually go to, the archon, the holder of that type of energy. And I find out that it might have been from a parent, but that parent was inspired by that feeling. They weren't inspired by another parent. It could happen that way too, but usually it's just direct. They feel it. They feel like it has to be this way. And so you get that feeling, and then it starts popping up because you think, okay, I want that. That's my ideal. And you're limited by what you create, right? So, and also the status quo of making things happen. And so you start to see those things come up in your reality to confirm it. And so you're in this vicious cycle of something that you might have not even cared about, and your family even doesn't care about, or your culture doesn't care about. And there's no one that really cares about it, and you kind of got tricked into it. These are the things that can happen, and sometimes they are placed. And this is what people are onto when they're complaining about, in a spiritual sense of being taken advantage of and dumbing you down and things like that. I will talk about that later as well. It's the making it, if you think of marketing and, when you go outside and every single advertisement is one thing over and over again, it's saturated. And so your attention is, we're humans, so our attention is everything. And so if you didn't get that memo of what, whatever they're trying to portray, that company. So it's not like an evil, weird entity. I mean, it's the company and probably an entity that is helping fund that, energetically. But it's not like something creepy. It's like humans that want to put they're a group of humans, a whole huge company that want to put their stuff out there. And they know this. Like a lot of marketing knows this. Some of them know a lot and some know a little bit. So they put that out there so often that there's no way for you to breathe. You're just like, okay, fine, I'm going to have that. There's nothing else I can have. Like, there's nothing else available. It's kind of like squishing out. And it's funny because this is a technique I help people with. I don't think taking things out of your life is the way to go unless you do need that. Like, if you don't need it, like if you're like, you're just doing it because you think that's how you do it, then I always say introduce new things so that there's no space. And then your body basically does a transformation. That's what happens. It's like you kind of enhance the cycle and you make the cycle more efficient than it would be like naturally. It'll always do what you need to do, but you can like for example, if someone doesn't like their job, if it's not toxic and hurting them and they just don't like it and they don't feel like it is a reflection of their soul, or who they are or whatever the reason is, or they, whatever, it's not hurting them and they feel stuck. They feel like they have to go there. or they have a family they need to support, but they don't like the job, and it's still not hurting them, but it is paying the bills. I tell them to introduce things they like and smother it with stuff they like. And by the time you do that, your body and your energy and everything around you is forced to change. There's no choice. So these people and these energies are doing the same. The people are doing this process. It is a what do you call it? Oh my God, they're not letting me say it. But anyway, it is a ritual. And so you can see how the ritual can be used in different ways. So consciously, when you use these rituals, it's amazing, right? Like that transformation, it's helping you on a small scale. If you want to do things to this is yourself, you can do this, right? They will give you the energy for yourself. If you want to do things to other people, this is when it gets to those creepy things that people are scared of, and they call all kinds of stuff, because you're doing it to other people. And when you do it to other people, you can never do it directly to one person. It has to be a group. And I will touch on that in the next one as well. So anyway, I went on to side note because that is actually the next one. I'm going to talk about how it works and things like that. But this is just only about, why they had it. Because we got naturally to the why. So why did they even want the learning teaching? So we know that they wanted it because of those, they had new options of energy on Earth, right? We know that. But why? Like, why even do that? So back to those aliens and things like that. It was a form of protection. A lot of these energies, if they did want to come and do these things, it wasn't available. Because if they were going to another place, they're not going to be able to be settled. They're not going to be supported with what they create. It's going to be always about surviving with nature, which is fine, and some energies want that, but that's not what's going on. The other thing is that there's a lot of areas that are just for animals and cryptids, and those places are not to be touched, because if they're gone, there's no kind of physical place for animals to do the things they need to do for Earth. So I originally was very upset when I found out about what they're doing to animals in here, but we're segueing to this as well. So this is a protection. So if you have these beings, we're going to go back to that alien in the very beginning that hurt a whole planet. If you have beings that are coming like that, you can't be having them being in nature, even if they want to have a nature experience. They have to be in the learning teaching, dimension for that. So you just can't, we can't, it would ruin Earth. So, when people are worried about aliens and beings and things coming to her Earth, look at how well organized it is. You can't even go to the dimension where there's all animals. I've been there. It's very cute. You can't, you can't do that, because if you did, the whole Earth would never work, and they wouldn't be able to try things out and see how it works, to see how that can help the learning teaching dimension. So that is something that it's a relief, and I'm going to do a new series about talking about animals and what each animal does for Earth. But this will be them in that dimension. So I will sometimes talk about what they do in the learning teaching dimension. I have done one about cats if anyone's interested already. But I'm going to focus on what they do in that other dimension. And remember, when something happens in a dimension, it always reflects in the others to wherever they're connected to. So if it's a being, it's going to connect to the other beings that they're connected to. If it's nature, it's going to connect to all the nature things it's going to connect to. It depends on what it is, but it's always going to bleed into the different dimensions and realities. So yes, even though the animals in here are here before this, and that's why a lot of them are so temporary, their lifespans, that also makes a difference of how long they live. That shows you how devoted they are to the learning teaching dimension. But it will reflect on the rest of the planet, all the other dimensions. So us doing horrible things, we can't just go, oh, well, this is just learning teaching and we can do whatever we want. It's a simulation. It still affects all the other dimensions. So it's not as one-on-one effective. Like, I was thinking how horrible it is that humans do these things and things like that to an animal, like put them in their house and keep them there forever. Like, it's not that is still like upsetting, but the bigger picture things like extinction and things like that, it does affect the other parts. It really does. They leave. That's why they go extinct. Because if they stay, it would be, they have found ways, but it's still not great. And the intentions. So the intentions is always important. This is what they talk about all the time, the intentions of the humans. So when humans have the intention to use something instead of collaborate with something, that using and sitting on a horse, not collaborating and seeing how it works together. So like food is actually not as bad as people think, because at least people know that they need to eat food to live. So this is something that humans actually are not as, some of them have eating disorders and things like that, but most people, like, they know that they need that food to nourish themselves, right? They don't need it because they're filling a hole. Remember what we said. So they understand that, but they don't understand, like, for example, a horse. Why do you do that? Like, why would you do that when, like, for fun? Why would you, for fun, make these animals not do their job in the, you know what I mean? So even though their jobs are elsewhere, especially wild animals. So when you see wild animals, it's almost like, I remember talking about this on the live about, and I didn't understand why I said it this way. I was like, what? But when you see animals in the wild, it's kind of like a hallucination. And what are hallucinations? They're other dimensions. They're other realities. So when you see those things happening, they're somewhere else. And then when you engage with them, you make a connection, because that's a human thing, and we won't get into that. But when you take these other ones, so this is what we're going to talk about. So remember how we talked about everything else? So all the beings that gave their life, nature did give their life to here. So this is also why when you see a tree, and there's more to the tree than just what this tree is. There's more to all these beings and things like that. Because they are, like I said, a hallucination almost of what they really are somewhere else. And this is why we feel so connected when we're in there, because when we connect to it, we get to be in that dimension that's full of all of Earth. And so you feel very grounded, very connected, because you're touching it. So that our touching and communication in all our senses is our way of connecting with everything instead of the learning teaching dimension. So when you really listen, when you really think, when you really hear, when you really speak, that's when you're connecting, and touch things and stuff like that. But when you don't, if you're just standing there and you're not touching anything, you're not listening to anyone, you have like earphones in, you are fully in the matrix. You are not on Earth. And you're temporarily just not existing almost. It's not a bad thing, but yeah. So when you do meditation, you're doing all of that. You don't even need to touch anything. You're going within and you're touching everything. And that's why people feel like, they're like, whoa, we're all one and stuff like that. It's because that's the way that people think they have to do that. They have to close their eyes. They have to go to sleep. They have to do meditation. But you can literally just go outside in a place that is nature. No humans have touched it. Like, they haven't done any like pathways or anything. You just go off, like, people say off grid. That's what true off grid is. For 2 seconds, go somewhere where a human hasn't done anything to it. Nature did the things. And you are in that dimension. Sometimes animals will help you with this. So we're going to get to that. So there were these types of animals a lot of the animals that we've domesticated that gave themselves to the Matrix, where they're actually here. And the way that they set it up was that they would be here for a few minutes, but as I said, touch and sight and smell connects us to these things. So when we see them, they become not a hallucination anymore. When we, like, when we fully see them, like we're looking and observing, not just like in the background. If we look and connect and look in their eyes, we see them. They are here. But originally they were meant, when that happens, it to be temporary. Just that moment for us, whether we need to eat them or they, whatever the case it is, there's a reason why you make that eye contact or hunting, all that stuff. So what happened was, like, I'm going to give, this is an example they always give, there's this little wolf that gives me this example, where when humans are having issues and navigating what's going on and they get lost in nature because they've gotten somewhere where they're literally in a different dimension and they need to get back to their house or they need to get back to wherever they are. They gave themselves to them so they could just appear. And they are fully open, these type of energies. Not all animals are, but these animals are. And I call them open as in anyone can come in. So if the animal only knows nature and is an animal, which that's what they are, right? And the person doesn't need just directions. I mean, that directions are even a human thing. If they don't need to know about nature and they just need to go back to their house, or they need to find, another village or whatever, a god or an architect will hop in, if that makes sense, and collaborate with and help them navigate what to do. If it's about getting water, if it's about, whatever, like being able to eat the right foods, sometimes birds and stuff like that, that would just be the animal themselves. They have all the information. They know about medicine. They know about food, anything having to do with nature. They can teach you those things. Unfortunately, we didn't take their offer. And so this is something that is also sad. There's a lot of sad things with this. But they gave themselves to be spokespersons for those kind of things, like nature, like getting from nature the things you need. So, like, let's say you're like, oh, I need medicine. It shouldn't be from a person. It should have been from, like, a bird, for example. And the bird should have showed you the combination of, they would just do it, like they would eat the things. Or any animal that would know how to do it would come and help them with this. They're also showing me, like an orangutan or something like that. If you were in that area, they would come and they'd show you how to, heal a wound or something like that. So having to do with your body, having to do with nature, the things you need to live on Earth and stuff like that, because they're like the true natives, they would be able to come. So they have a lot of space. Unfortunately, humans started to want these things for weird projects, like taking tusks, taking all kinds of like things like the whales, oil stuff from whales, all kinds of horrible things. And when they do this, and it's not a process where it is actually to help, they're not listening to the animals. The animals didn't say, hey, can you come and take my tusks to make these things? They didn't collaborate. They took. So that's different. So what they did, and yeah, it has nothing to do with eating and things like that. That's a whole different thing, and we're not going there. When it's taking things to make products and to do your creations and not thinking of the animal as something special. They do this with plants as well, but animals, it's a bit different because the plants are kind of, they didn't give themselves, they're there too. They're like actually there. I think the plants are the most there, even the trees. It's just that the representative is not as potent as the other, if that makes sense. But these specific animals. So we have a mixture of animals. We have those animals, like I said, that are actually in a different dimension, and we're hallucinating seeing them, and they can teach us different things by just them being themselves in the wild. And we can lock them in, but we can never really get them, if that makes sense. They're like the ones that could probably hurt us. Like, they would probably hurt us. That's how their reaction is. Like, that's how, and I don't know, we're not going to get into that because there should be so much stuff. We're not going to do that. But anyway, so back to the animals that gave their self into the Matrix. So humans decided to keep them instead of talking with them. And so they got inspired to make products, like I said, and they were hunting, and they're like, this is complicated. And so they wanted to make products, and the products even were food products, and they wanted to save things and, you know, grow their families. And that's another thing of why they did that, but we're not going to get into that. That's a whole different, it's a human choice and things like that. And so these animals are intelligent, and not only just intelligent from Earth intelligent, but they have other intelligences, a possibility. They're open to other intelligences, right? And so if these humans are, you know, domesticating them, what happens is, or like seeing them too often. So for example, whales, if they go over and over again to see the whale, I think they said 3 times, if you do something 3 times to the same like pack or area or whatever, those animals will be basically like the half domestication. But anyway, I'm going to go into more detail because now that we know more, it's not as it's horrific, but now there's some like more information. But anyway, so when you do that and you domesticate them and you make a farm or you make something like that where you do save it for later, you're not collaborating, are you? You're basically taking the natives that could tell you things, and they're supposed to be temporary. They're supposed to go back to their thing after they've helped you. They're they're kind of hybrids, because the other ones, like I said, they get stuck, like, because you take them and they're not that type. It's complicated. But if anybody wants more details, please book a session. But anyway, so when those when they get taken, they become like pets or workers or in a farm or whatever. They completely are not supposed to be. And it's torture because they can't be a human, they can't express a human, but inside they have all this possibility of intelligence. And so this is the thing that, like I said, before, I wouldn't talk about it, only if people are ready, but that's the only part I'm going to talk about because it has to do with this. I'm not going to go into it anymore until I do the actual animal series. But this is what they did. They gave their life to this, and this is how we did that. So this is why things affect things. So yes, okay, they did give themselves to this, but it wasn't for that reason. So you can think of them like little secret agents that got basically, you know, they got imprisoned kind of, and they're living longer than they're supposed to, and they're not able to do their job. No one's co-creating with them. Anyway, so yeah, it's a bit sad, and yeah, I always get really sad when I think about it. So this is the end of this episode, and in part 2 of the next episode, it will be about how it works. I touched a little bit in this one because you have to kind of, for things to make sense, but I'm going to go into detail. I wasn't going to talk about the blood things, but I will. And because it was just when the energy was coming through, I think it was in July. Yeah, so it was like 4 months ago. It was like, might have been even earlier than that, because I have some stuff written and I didn't write when first. But anyway, the stuff that we've talked about is a bit older. I've been sitting on it for a long time, but this stuff is the conspiracy things. Like I said, we already kind of started, right? I started talking about when people talk about reptilians and things like that. I already started talking about that. This is a bit different, and yeah, we'll talk more about that. And there's a tiny bit about sacrifice things and stuff like that. And what else? Yeah, the blood. I'm gonna focus on the blood. I thought that I was actually gonna not talk about the blood, but I think I'm gonna focus on that because it's important. People really need to know that it's not about you having the blood, it's about you choosing to be connected to a collective, and where does that collective come from, basically. So that's what I'd like to focus on. And I think that's a good segue to talk about the ancestors. I do have some ancestor videos, but I'm trying to think of what, because also I would like to do the cultures next, so we'll see. So I'm gonna leave it there, because otherwise I'll just keep thinking about what I'm doing. And the next one will be, like I said, about that. Okay. Have a good evening or day wherever you are. Bye.